Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, the president signs a new executive order. The White House says it will strip federal funding from schools that let men compete in women's sports. Jason Blair has the latest. President Trump meeting with the governors of Texas and California to discuss border security and wildfire aid. Meanwhile, the White House clarifies the president's plan to rebuild Gaza. Resettle reports. Guatemala will accept more illegal immigrants deported from the U.S., whether they are from Guatemala or elsewhere. It's the latest Central American country to make such promises to help the U.S. stem illegal immigration. The Pentagon announces that the first high-threat immigrants arrived at Guantanamo Bay. Arian Pazdar has the announcement and important immigration updates.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump meeting with the governors of Texas and California today. It comes as the White House seeks to clarify the president's stance on U.S. involvement in Gaza. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. First, tell us what we're hearing today about Trump's Gaza plan.
Good evening to you as well, Tiff. So today we got some more clarification from the White House a day after President Trump suggested he wants the U.S. to take over Gaza and own it. The White House says that President Trump is not planning to use American taxpayer dollars to fund reconstruction efforts in Gaza, and nor is he committed yet to send any U.S. troops there. Watch.
The president has not committed to putting boots on the ground in Gaza. He has also said that the United States is not going to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza. His administration is going to work with our partners in the region to reconstruct this region. And let me just take a step back here, because this is an out-of-the-box idea. That's who President Trump is. That's why the American people elected him.
Meanwhile, last night during a joint press conference with Israeli Prime Minister, President Trump did not rule out sending troops as an option, saying he might if it's necessary.
Given what you've said about Gaza, did the U.S. send troops to help secure the security vacuum?
As far as Gaza is concerned, we'll do what is necessary. If it's necessary, we'll do that.
And when asked about why President Trump would not rule out as an option, the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt told us today that she believes it's part of Trump's negotiating tactics and he will make a deal on that, and adding that it's to keep the option open as leverage in negotiations. And meanwhile, last night, Trump also proposed a mass and permanent resettlement for Palestinians living in Gaza. And the White House today seemingly walking it back, saying that Palestinians will only need to be temporarily relocated as the reconstruction efforts play out. But the White House does stress to us, though, that the U.S. is getting involved in the reconstruction efforts, and that is to ensure stability in the region, adding that President Trump is a great deal maker and will strike a deal with regional partners. Tiff.
And Iris, President Trump today also met with the governors of Texas and California. What did they talk about?
You're right. So President Trump today met with the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, and that's as Los Angeles is still recovering from wildfire damage. Actually, that meeting could still be going on right now. We're still waiting for Newsom to come out to talk to us, potentially. And during his meeting with Governor Greg Abbott of Texas, the two talk about, of course, border security. And Governor Greg Abbott told me after their meeting that he proposed to Trump several options about what Texas can offer him in securing the border, including, he says, 4,000 jail cells to detain illegal immigrants and more border walls, as well as what he says 2 military bases to house over 2,000 soldiers. He also told me that he told President Trump that illegal immigration in Texas has dropped to, quote, a mere trickle. And meanwhile, when it comes to the topic about Mexican troops to be deployed to the U.S. border with Mexico, Abbott told me that he expects 10,000 Mexican troops to bring an immediate end to illegal immigration. Watch.
What you have seen, any progress with that? Whenever Mexico does send troops to the border, it has an immediate impact, an immediate reduction in the number of people crossing the border illegally. In the past, I've seen 1,000 or 2,000, not 10,000. If they do that, it'll have an enormous impact, and we will see an almost immediate elimination of any illegal border crossings.
And just earlier this week, Mexico agreed to send 10,000 National Guard troops to the northern border with the U.S. and that to help the U.S. stop the flow of illegal immigration and fentanyl into the U.S. And in exchange, President Trump agreed to pause his imminent 25% tariff on Mexican goods as part of the deal. And just today, we have news that at least 1,000 of those Mexican troops have arrived at the Mexico's northern border. Tiff.
All right, Iris, thanks for those updates. House Speaker Mike Johnson reacted to President Trump's plan for the Gaza Strip. Here's what Johnson said at the House Republicans leadership stakeout earlier today.
There'll be more details forthcoming on that, of course. The initial announcement yesterday, I think, was greeted by surprise by many, but cheered by, I think, people all around the world. Why? Because that area is so dangerous, and he's taking bold, decisive action to try to ensure the peace of that region. It's a bold move, certainly. Far bolder than what's been done before, but I think we've got to stand unequivocally in an unwavering manner, as the whip said, with Israel, our closest ally and friend in the Middle East. And I think if we could bring control of that situation and bring about a lasting peace there, it would do well for everybody, not just in the region, but around the world. It's a volatile place. And I think the strong and decisive move is an important step in that regard.
Johnson also told a weekly news conference that he would discuss Gaza with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He is said to meet with the Israeli leader at the Capitol tomorrow. The House Speaker also answered questions on Doge and the Department of Education. He said the time has come to dismantle the Department of Education, and he expects wide support for it among congressional Republicans. Regarding Doge, Johnson said he believes Elon Musk and his agency are acting within the scope of their authority and rejected claims that Doge is seizing power without authority. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today at the Pentagon. The two reaffirmed the strength of the U.S.-Israel relationship. Hegseth said that President Trump was willing to think outside the box when it comes to the Gaza Strip and look for unique ways to solve problems. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke in Guatemala today and clarified Trump's plan for the Gaza Strip.
The only thing President Trump has done very generously, in my view, is offer the United States willingness to step in, clear the debris, clean the place up from all the destruction that's on the ground, clean it up of all these unexploded munitions. And in the meantime, the people living there will not be able, the people who call that home will not be able to live there while you have crews coming in and removing debris, while you have munitions being removed, etc. That's the offer that he's made.
Trump said he envisioned the Gaza Strip as one day being a place where international communities, including Palestinians, could live in harmony. President Trump signs an executive order barring men from competing in women's sports, and Pam Bondi is sworn in as U.S. Attorney General with remarks from the president. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
One of President Trump's latest executive orders will provide, quote, equal opportunity for women and girls and keep, quote, men out of women's sports.
Last year, a male cyclist posing as a woman competed in the 800-mile Arizona Trail Race, a very big deal in cycling, and obliterated the women's course record by nearly 5.5 hours.
A White House document says the executive order upholds the promise of Title IX and ends the dangers and unfair participation of men in women's sports.
We're putting every school receiving taxpayer dollars on notice that if you let men take over women's sports teams or invade your locker rooms, you will be investigated for violations of Title IX and risk your federal funding.
While signing, Trump was joined by over 20 women and their daughters from parental rights advocacy group Moms for Liberty. Women's sports advocates Riley Gaines and Paula Scanlon were there also. Other related actions Trump has taken since entering office include an executive order proclaiming that the U.S. government will recognize only two sexes, male and female, as well as an order to cut federal funding or support for gender transition surgeries for people under 19 years old. Title IX, passed in 1972, prohibits sex-based discrimination in any school or other education program that receives federal funding. And the U.S. officially has a new Attorney General. Pam Bondi was sworn in on Capitol Hill with Trump in attendance. The Senate confirmed Bondi on Tuesday, 54-46, with Democrat Senator John Fetterman joining Republicans in the vote. Bondi says she will make the country proud.
And I will restore integrity to the Justice Department, and I will fight violent crime throughout this country and throughout this world and make America safe again.
Trump says that he's confident Bondi will fulfill her duties.
But she's going to be fair, and she'll lead the Department of Justice in crushing violent crime, demolishing the gangs, which are all over the place.
Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
CIA workers who don't like their jobs can leave and get 8 months of pay. Every employee at the agency received the buyout offer yesterday. It's part of President Donald Trump's broad effort to shrink the federal government and shape it to his agenda. Many federal organizations have extended similar offers. But the Central Intelligence Agency is the first major national security agency to do so. That comes after newly appointed CIA Director John Ratcliffe personally decided he wanted his agency to be involved. Some specific occupations and areas of expertise may be restricted from the offer. Meanwhile, employees of the U.S. Agency for International Development now have word they're being placed on administrative leave, and those working overseas must return to the U.S. An agency directive to staff around the world says the order applies to all USAID direct hire personnel. There's an exception for certain leadership roles. The administrative leave starts on Friday, and anyone working outside of the U.S. has been ordered to return within 30 days. The statement on the USAID website ends with "Thank you for your service." The agency, which delivers humanitarian help overseas, was established by President John F. Kennedy during the Cold War. In the time since, Republicans and Democrats have fought over it and its funding. Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle are introducing legislation that could affect the agenda of the Trump administration. Republicans are seeking to strengthen Trump's DEI agenda, while Democrats target his Department of Government efficiency.
Republicans are introducing the Dismantle DEI Act. It would target any federal offices as well as federal funding for diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI programs. The bill was introduced in the House and the Senate. Now, part of the legislation updates the Civil Rights Act to define DEI practices as discriminating. The bill would also prohibit workplace standards claiming any particular race is inherently oppressive or oppressed, among other things. The proposed measure follows Trump's earlier actions on DEI since he returned to office. Meanwhile, on the side of the Democrats, lawmakers want to prevent special government employees from accessing government information. This is mostly to stop Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or Doge, from accessing any sensitive data on U.S. individuals. Top Democrats say Musk is rapidly consolidating control over large swaths of the federal government with Trump's blessing. They're arguing that Musk is sidelining career officials, gaining access to sensitive data, and more. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer laid out the goals of the bill.
Our bill aims to do a few simple things. One, to deny access to special government employees that don't have to disclose their conflicts of interest or any other ethic agreements. Two, to deny access to anyone with conflicts of interest or lack of appropriate clearance. And three, include personal tax information into existing privacy protections. We call our legislation Stop the Steal.
The Secret Service rebuffed a group of congressional Democrats who tried to gain entry to the Treasury building yesterday. They said that they wanted to provide oversight after the Department of Government Efficiency gained access to the Treasury's federal payment system.
It is time for us to shine. It is time for us to be heard. It is time for us to make sure that they know we will not go.
Oh, you want to use our money to go to Mars? No. We want to use our money right here in Washington, D.C.
We have to fight this in the Congress. We have to fight this in the streets.
Elon Musk is here to collect on his investment.
Yes.
He is here to seize power for himself. We are here to fight back.
Yes.
The lawmakers argue that the Doge, run by Elon Musk, has what they call dangerous access to federal payment systems. Treasury officials insist the access is read-only. Democrats at the protest called the Doge a power grab and pledged legal action.
Democrats and Republicans have laid out their congressional strategies ahead of a government funding deadline. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on this story.
We will, through budget reconciliation, being looking for ways that we can scrub federal programs and find ways to spend money more efficiently and get us on a more sustainable fiscal track, which I think right now is, as you look at the deficits and the debt in the foreseeable future, that picture's not a good one. And so it's high time that we had this conversation. Doge is a part of that, and I also think that Congress, particularly through the budget reconciliation process, will be a part of that as well.
That was Senate Majority Leader John Thune commenting on the reconciliation bill Republicans planned originally to kickstart this week with a markup of a budget resolution in the House's Budget Committee.
No one wants to leave any American who is in need hanging, so to speak, right? But at the same time, we recognize we have a $36 trillion federal debt, and we have to balance these needs. It's about priorities, and the federal government can and should do a better job about putting money away for a rainy day, so to speak. I mean, we're working on deficits now. We've got to turn that around.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson's proposal outlined around $300 billion in government spending cuts, but House Freedom Caucus members and other conservatives in the Budget Committee are demanding closer to $1 trillion in government spending cuts.
Donald Trump is working with House Republicans on efforts that will hurt them, on efforts that will have the potential to reduce Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. As they're huddling behind closed doors, they do not believe in transparency. They are trying to cut a deal, just like Speaker Johnson cut a deal to have his gavel.
Democrats outlined this Wednesday a 10-point plan with legal, legislative, and grassroots mobilizations actions that they will take in opposition to Republican spending cuts.
If Donald Trump and Republicans use their new majorities to push the same old GOP policies of tax cuts for the very rich, cuts to health care, trickle-down economics, Democrats will fight back.
Democrats also threatened to force a government shutdown on March 14th when government funding expires if Republicans decide to push ahead and pass large-scale spending cuts through a reconciliation bill. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Guatemala's president says he'll accept illegal immigrants from other countries who are deported from the U.S. This after El Salvador offered to accept even violent criminals who are U.S. citizens. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Guatemala says it will accept illegal immigrants from other countries who are deported from the U.S. This comes as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with the Guatemalan president on the secretary's latest stop in Central America. On Monday, Rubio announced a similar deal with El Salvador, and even broader so, agreeing to accept violent criminal U.S. citizens, though the details of which are not yet worked out. Guatemala has also offered to significantly increase deportation flights from the U.S.
The president, who's made the offer today, then we'll be working on the details of all of this, but the offer to increase these flights and these deportations by 40%. It's very important for us in terms of the migratory situation that we're facing. His willingness to accept not just nationals, but those from other nationalities as they seek to ultimately return to their own homelands is also important.
Since Trump took office, Guatemala has accepted a U.S. military flight with deported illegal immigrants, unlike Colombia, which didn't cooperate with Trump until he threatened tariffs on the country. Guatemala is one of the largest sources of illegal immigration in the United States. Under previous administrations, the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, ran projects in Guatemala to address illegal immigration and costing hundreds of millions of dollars. But the Trump administration is dismantling the agency, which Rubio is now leading. Rubio says USAID has been insubordinate for decades.
If you read the statute that created USAID, it is supposed to take policy direction from the President, the National Security Council, and the Secretary of State. And yet, over the last 2 decades, it has not, and it has gotten worse and worse. And multiple administrations have complained about it, but none have done anything about it. We are going to do something about it.
Rubio said the U.S. will work to build ports and highways in Guatemala to benefit its economy. Guatemala also recognizes Taiwan, the self-governing island that the Chinese regime claims as its own. Rubio spoke highly of Guatemala's commitment in siding with Taiwan over the Chinese Communist Party.
And in particular, as part of that is your longstanding friendship and relationship with the people of Taiwan. And we hope and we'll do all we can to expand it beyond just the diplomatic realm to an economic one. We'll do all we can to facilitate more Taiwanese investment in the economy of Guatemala so that it can continue to grow into the advanced, prosperous 21st century economy.
Rubio has already shown progress in ridding the region of China's influence. Panama has promised not to renew its Belt and Road infrastructure agreements with the Chinese regime. Panama was the first Latin American nation to join China's Belt and Road initiative and is now the first to leave. Jack Bradley, NTD News.
The Pentagon announces that the first high-threat immigrants have arrived at Guantanamo Bay. That's as ICE reports it arrested 100 members of a Venezuelan gang in Colorado. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the immigration update.
Okay. The Pentagon announces that the first illegal immigrants have officially arrived at Guantanamo Bay. A statement reads that these 10 high-threat individuals are currently being housed in vacant detention facilities. That's to ensure the safe and secure detention of these individuals until they can be transported to their country of origin or other appropriate destinations. Photographs showed the immigrants in handcuffs as they were being prepared to board the plane to Cuba on Tuesday. Mexico's foreign minister commented on the U.S. sending some immigrants to Gitmo.
I can say that no Mexican will go there under any circumstances. We sent a diplomatic letter to the U.S. Embassy saying that we will receive every Mexican who wants to come.
This comes just a few days after Mexico agreed to improve border security. President Trump had previously warned he'd impose heavy tariffs if Mexico didn't help secure the border. The White House gave more details on Wednesday.
Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum agreed to permanently supply 10,000 Mexican soldiers on the U.S. border who will be specifically designated to stopping fentanyl and criminal aliens from pouring into our country.
Footage shows hundreds of Mexican soldiers being mobilized. They'll be posted to hotspots with high rates of illegal immigration and drug and weapons trafficking. Meanwhile, in Georgia,
I'm going to ask you again because you didn't give me a very definitive answer last time. Are you taking any medication?
Check it out. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, conducted a targeted operation early Wednesday. They apprehended an alleged immigrant from Mexico with a criminal history. Officers say they found a weapon in his car and ammunition in his pocket.
We had a lot of officers out in the field today. They quickly surrounded the vehicle, jumped out, and were able to grab the subject pretty quickly. And that's when they found the firearm. So everything went smooth, but it could have gone really bad.
Also on Wednesday, ICE published this picture saying over 100 members of the violent Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua were targeted for arrest and detention in Colorado. Officials say the investigations are still ongoing. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
A federal judge in Maryland today became the second one nationally to block the Trump administration from implementing the executive order aimed at limiting birthright citizenship. NTD's Arlene Richards has the details.
U.S. District Judge Deborah Boardman, a Biden appointee, issued a nationwide preliminary injunction blocking President Trump's order limiting birthright citizenship from going into effect on February 19th as planned. 2 immigrant rights groups and 5 pregnant women had argued that their children were at risk of being denied U.S. citizenship based on their parents' immigration status. In siding with the plaintiffs, Boardman said during the hearing, "Today, virtually every baby born on U.S. soil is a U.S. citizen upon birth. That law and tradition are and will remain the status quo pending the resolution of this case." Trump's order, issued shortly after he assumed office, claims that the 14th Amendment's Citizenship Clause does not universally grant citizenship to everyone born in the United States. In particular, it argues that the phrase, "subject to the jurisdiction thereof," in the clause excludes children from illegal immigrants and other non-citizens from automatic U.S. citizenship. Boardman's order provided longer-term relief than an earlier 2-week pause imposed in January by a Seattle-based federal judge. That judge is set to consider whether to issue a long preliminary injunction on Thursday. A Justice Department lawyer asked for 60 days to respond to the injunction. It's unclear whether the Trump administration will appeal. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Coming up, Vice President J.D. Vance spoke to freedom lovers gathering in Washington, D.C. today to promote religious liberty. What more needs to be done for freedom of belief to become the norm at home and abroad? We hear from the people after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. This morning, Vice President J.D. Vance spoke to freedom lovers from all over the world who are gathering in Washington, D.C. for the International Religious Freedom Summit. NTD's Melina Weiskup brings us more.
Vice President J.D. Vance addressed the International Religious Freedom Summit with the message of how America was founded. He said this nation was founded on moral principles and said that the Trump administration is dedicated to solidifying and promoting religious freedom at home and abroad. Here's J.D. Vance earlier today.
In America, our founding fathers rightly recognized this, listing freedom of religion first among the liberties enshrined in our great Constitution. Before he was elected president, John Adams, who was the first vice president, I might add, observed that politicians, quote, may plan and speculate for liberty, but it is religion and morality alone which can establish the principles upon which freedom can securely stand.
Some participants tell me they'd like to see the Trump administration impose sanctions on officials that violate religious freedoms in countries all over the world. Others tell me they'd like to see the Trump administration reenact the Abraham Accords to bring peace to the Middle East.
To maintain peace, stability in the Middle East and entire world, we need to go back to our source, our father Abraham. And then Muslim, Christians, and Jews are from the same family.
Others shared with me the urgency of rooting out communism as a major step to promoting freedom of belief.
Communism usually first goes for religion, and they want to abolish religion so that people don't have anything to believe in, and they try to strip that away as one of the first things under a communist regime.
And we heard a similar message from a group of students for Falun Gong, representing a spiritual group that's undergone persecution by the Chinese Communist Party for the past 25 years.
Dictator Jiang Zemin at that time saw the practice and its spiritual teachings as a threat to the communist rule, and so they ordered a crackdown on it in July 20th, 1999.
And they tell me that the persecution of this faith is now happening here at home, with media outlets spreading misinformation that mimics that of the Chinese regime.
Fact check everything that's coming out about Falun Gong, because what scares me and what is the most chilling is we've seen the exact same media misinformation talking points happen in China before the persecution began 25 years ago.
One view that we bring to this conference and to a discussion, particularly about prisoners of conscience or people who are imprisoned for their faith, is that we can resist.
The International Religious Freedom Summit group has already laid out a 7-page approach that they'd like to see the Trump administration take to be able to promote religious freedom at home and abroad. For example, they'd like to see Trump leverage foreign aid to be able to promote that religious freedom, as well as continue to provide aid for those who are persecuted abroad. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Argentina is leaving the World Health Organization. The decision comes after President Trump issued an executive order last month to pull the U.S. out of the global health group.
President Javier Milei told Foreign Minister Gerardo Berthein to withdraw Argentina's participation in the World Health Organization. This is backed by our deep differences regarding health management, especially during the pandemic, that along with former President Alberto Fernandez's led us to the longest confinement in the history of humanity and to the lack of independence from the political influence of other states. We Argentines will not allow an international organization to intervene in our sovereignty, much less in our health.
Milei was a sharp critic of the lockdowns imposed by former President Alberto Fernandez during the pandemic. Trump has similarly claimed that the World Health Organization mishandled the COVID-19 pandemic and other international health crises. President Trump had also criticized what he called unfairly onerous payments from the United States. The U.S. was the organization's biggest funder. The WHO has no authority to compel countries to take specific health actions. Coming up, President Trump's latest executive order addresses men in women's sports. An analyst joins us to explore the phenomenon and what changes we can expect to see. And a European luxury fashion brand considers making more products here in America. This as the EU shows signs it wants to avoid potential tariffs from the U.S. after the break. Welcome back. If you're just joining us now, here are some of today's top headlines. Lawmakers and global leaders reacted to President Trump's plan to rebuild the Gaza Strip. Republican allies praised the idea, saying it could lead to lasting peace, while Palestinians and their allies called it unacceptable. Vice President J.D. Vance addressed the annual International Religious Freedom Summit in Washington, D.C. He said the Trump administration will vigorously defend religious freedom and expand on its achievements from the president's first term. And Trump signed the No Men in Women's Sports executive order banning biological males from women's sports. Schools that fail to comply will face federal investigations and could lose federal funding. Joining us now to discuss this executive order on women's sports is Terry Schilling, president of American Principles Project. Terry, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you again. Now, President Trump said with this executive order, the war on women's sports is over. Now, I've seen big cases making headlines, but how widespread has this become across the nation, as in men who identify as women participating in women's sports?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. The issue of men who claim to be women and joining women's sports teams and competing against them has exploded across the country. And it's not just a political movement. It's not just an activist movement. We've had over 3,500 cases of men who claim to be women competing against women. And this has led to incredible injuries, some of them life-threatening, but it's also stolen a lot of opportunities and records away from women. President Trump went into detail about a few of those records where these males who claim to be women go in and beat the women's record. For example, the powerlifting tournament, there was one competition where the male who said he was a woman came in and broke the women's record by over 400 points in the deadlift. That's absolutely unacceptable. It's absolutely absurd. And it's unfortunate that the progressives have gotten so radical in America that President Trump even had to do this today. Biological sex is real. We all know that. There are only two sexes, male and female. And it's really good that President Trump is no longer tolerating any ridiculousness and silliness around this issue.
Now, schools that fail to comply could face investigations by the Department of Education, which may result in the loss of federal funding. Now, how would this work, considering that President Trump has indicated he'll abolish the Department of Education? Could he still provide funding if the DOE were to be done away with?
Absolutely. So just because the Department of Education goes away, it doesn't mean that federal education dollars go away. And what's most likely to happen is those education dollars would be given out by the Treasury Department or another government agency. And however, these laws or this new executive order will be enforced through the Office of Civil Rights at Department of Education. And once if he's successful in eliminating the Department of Education, which I surely hope he is successful at doing that, it will go under most likely the Department of Justice, where people will be able to make civil rights claims under education when there is a male who identifies as a woman taking away women's opportunities in sports. So this is a very good day for America. There's still going to be education dollars out there. It just won't be done through the Department of Education, where they make you jump through all these hoops and hurdles just to get your hard-earned tax dollars back.
Just to expand on that, say a state were to forgo the federal funding to maintain the inclusion of men in women's sports. At that point, does it become a state issue, or does the president have other ways of enforcing this policy in schools, kind of like you were just touching on?
The federal government has a lot of different maneuvers. They because of how centralized power has gotten in Washington, D.C., they have many different ways besides just federal funding where they can enforce this. After all, this is a civil right. Women were given through Title IX equal opportunities in education and in sports, regardless of whether or not there's a Department of Education. So that doesn't matter. But President Trump can send the DOJ and investigate these schools. He can withhold funding. There are lots of different levers of power that President Trump can use to make sure that women still have opportunities in athletics and education. This is very, very important. Women have had to work very, very hard to secure these rights, and we can't let them go away silently into the night.
And on that note, how far do you expect to see Trump's position on ensuring fairness in sports go, as in will we see substantive changes in the NCAA and even the Olympics over the next 4 years?
Well, that's a great question. In fact, Charlie Baker, who is chairman of the NCAA, has actually already issued a statement essentially thanking President Trump for the clarity and guidance from the federal government. And they are right now considering and looking into how they can enforce these rules that President Trump has come out with today. So President Trump, just with the stroke of a pen, ended up saving women's sports all across the country. It's a beautiful day to be an American, but most especially it's a beautiful day to be a female athlete in America. I'm so happy for my 3 daughters who will have those opportunities, and for all my grandchildren, my granddaughters that come about, they will have the opportunity to compete in their athletic competitions without any males trying to cheat them out of it.
And lastly, on the flip side, what are you anticipating to see in terms of pushback? Could we see lawsuits or states employing their own strategies, as we saw with sanctuary city status in terms of immigration?
Yeah, look, this is where politicians don't have to choose between good politics and good policy. Where the American people are, by not just majorities, but super majorities, is they don't want males who claim to be women to be able to compete against girls in sports. And so these Democrats in blue states, they can run, but they can't hide. Voters are going to find out about this. And the more that Democrats in blue states like California, Illinois, and New York fight President Trump, the more power they're going to lose in the states. American Principles Project, the group that I run, we are prepared to spend lots and lots of money in campaigns and elections against any Democrats or Republicans, by the way, that don't go along with biological reality and try to enforce this gender insanity on our children.
Terry Schilling, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
The Department of Education could soon face a major overhaul. There's speculation the Trump administration is looking to downsize or even dismantle the agency. But are everyday Americans open to this idea? NTD's Sam Wong spoke with folks in D.C. to find out.
I hope that is not true, and I'm hoping that he considers and reconsiders it. I think there's a lot more consequences than benefits of eliminating the Department of Education.
Everything in our government needs to be downsized. I don't know about abolishing it, but definitely a big change. If it takes that to do it, to make the change, that's what we need to do.
I think the Education Department helps ensure that schools in poorer states meet the same standards as schools in rich states.
There definitely needs to be, like he said, restructuring. So, and there are a lot of people, like you're talking about, losing the jobs, and you got to try to put yourself in their place, but then again, you got to look at the whole picture.
As part of the idea of doing this whole thing is to bring education back to the states. Understood. So, are you open to that?
I'd be interested to see what that looks like. Does that look different for education in Arizona versus in New York or versus Colorado?
If you don't have a national education policy, you'll have states like Mississippi where people will really be at a disadvantage in terms of competing in the American economy.
If Donald Trump is going to enact nationwide change through the school systems, I feel like it would make more sense for him to keep the Department of Education, have policies through the Department of Education, rather than sending it back to the states where it'll be more divided.
We have seen a significant drop in English proficiency, and also students haven't been doing well on math, and meanwhile we're spending roughly $80 billion a year to fund the education department. What would be the proper solution to that issue right now if we don't completely defund or downsize the education department at this point?
I think that's a valid concern, right? What the federal funding we can allow to do is it's an and thing. So we can do to make sure our grades get up by supporting our youth and their mental health and their well-being.
There are a lot of benefits of more like trade-based skills. I think we need to start cutting back on the skills that are being taught in schools that aren't necessarily beneficial to like later in life.
You can look at Chinese to the Indians to the Japanese, the cultures. Their mathematics are just extremely well. They're very educated. You know what it boils down to? It boils down to parenting.
I just hope they improve I have grandkids, improve the school systems, teach the kids, go back to teaching the kids what they need to know.
More European luxury brands are considering making their items here in the U.S. A trade deficit with Europe has President Trump contemplating more tariffs. On Tuesday, the European Union said they want to engage swiftly with the U.S. to avoid that possibility. Luxury label LVMH has already hinted at manufacturing in the United States. NTD's Sean Marshall has more on the prospect of European luxury brands made in the USA.
LVMH CEO Bernard Arnault has sparked a debate over France's attractiveness for business. In post-earnings remarks late on Tuesday, the billionaire said his company, known for its high-end products made in France and Italy, has been seriously considering bulking up its production capacities in the United States. Retail strategist and CEO of Retail Boss, Janelle Alvarado, shared with me her thoughts about luxury American-made items possibly becoming more of a trend.
So we're going to continue to see this, and is it something that luxury brands should or should not do? I think it's always been something that has been maybe not in the forefront as a lot of their products are made and known for being produced internationally in Italy and Paris, right? Known for their high craftsmanship. The perceptions have been changing where Americans do see that brands could be a premium product made in U.S. It doesn't have to just be an overseas made product to have quality.
The LVMH CEO cited a wind of optimism in the U.S. that contrasted with a cold shower of potentially higher corporate taxes in France. But any move to production on the other side of the Atlantic would likely be limited in scope, said LVMH investors. But how might Americans feel about luxury brands traditionally produced in Italy and France being made in America?
Customers are a little bit changing in their mindset of what luxury really means. And I feel like the U.S., especially made in America products, is starting to catch on as something that can be a place where premium product is made. And also that customer has more peace of mind that it's being crafted in a more sustainable as well as fair way.
LVMH already has 2 sites in California, opened in 1990 and 2011, and a factory in Texas opened in 2019. It also acquired jewelry workshops with the company's $16 billion purchase of American label Tiffany & Company in 2021. The LVMH CFO told reporters on Tuesday American clients accept made in the U.S., so we can consider the United States. European Union Trade Chief Maros Šefčovič also said on Tuesday, quote, "We are ready to engage immediately, and we hope that through this early engagement, we can avoid the measures which would bring a lot of disturbance to the most important trade and investment relationship on this planet." Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Coming up in soccer, Cristiano Ronaldo turns 40 today. Dave Martin joins us to look back at some of his greatest achievements when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer now for your sports news. We're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot to discuss, but let's start in soccer as international star Cristiano Ronaldo turns 40 today. Now, in honor of that, what would you say are some of his greatest achievements?
Wow, he's got a lot to choose from. I mean, he won the first of his 5 Ballon d'Or awards in 2008. That's when he scored 42 goals. Now, that award, of course, for the best player in the world. He also won in 2013, 2014, 16, 17, so 5 times, pretty good there. Now, in 2018, he scored his 100th career goal in the Champions League, the first to achieve that. He has 134 currently. That's the most, although Messi has joined him in the 100 club. He also won the Champions League title that year with Real Madrid. That was his 5th. That's also a record. But I think he would probably point to leading Portugal to winning the European Championship in 2016 as maybe his greatest achievement ever. I mean, everyone has, of course, country pride, and he certainly does as well. Incredibly, he's still playing at a very high level today in Saudi Arabia. So happy birthday to Cristiano Ronaldo.
While moving to NFL news, President Trump, who's planning to attend the Super Bowl Sunday, he's actually the first ever sitting president if he does attend. He was asked what he thinks or who he thinks will win the big game, and he seems to disagree with your pick.
Yeah, when asked, he didn't actually want to say, but then said there's a certain quarterback that seems to be a pretty good winner. Now, let me point out that Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts actually won a title in college, but Patrick Mahomes is with 3 Super Bowl rings and counting, so I'm guessing he's meaning Mahomes. If that's Trump's pick, he's not alone. The Chiefs are slight 1.5-point favorites, and they're actually mostly healthy finally for this game, save for Rashid Rice. But at least their playmakers on offense are healthy, and they're going to need that because the Eagles have the best defense in the NFL. They allow the fewest yards, the second fewest points. Meanwhile, on offense, not only do they have Hurts, they've got Saquon Barkley, who just became the 8th player in NFL history to rush for 2,000 yards. And I talked at length about how the Chiefs have a dominant record without very dominant play. So I am sticking to my Eagles prediction.
Well, elsewhere in the NFL, the Players Association has pushed back against Commissioner Roger Goodell's statement that suggests the league could adopt an 18-game schedule. What's their argument?
Well, he mentioned injuries. Now, I'm talking about NFL Players Association Executive Director Lloyd Howell, who said they've only had informal discussions about it with the NFL. Any change like this, though, would have to be agreed upon by the Players Association. But there'll be plenty discussed with that as well. Like, would the roster size also be increased? Would there be more bye weeks? It would affect a number of other issues. And when they expanded from 16 games to 17 games just a few years ago, it was only by a slim vote margin that the players approved it. Of course, the other side of it is that extra money means more, or an extra game means more TV money to go around, which could be billions more dollars. But this is not the first time Goodell has mentioned it, though. Maybe it'll be officially discussed sometime soon. We'll have to see.
Well, moving to NBA action tonight, Kevin Durant and the Phoenix Suns will play at the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, Durant, meanwhile, is very close to a major career milestone.
Yeah, the 30,000-point club. He's just 26 points away. That's actually his season average, but he would just be the 8th player ever to join this club, so it's very exclusive. And I've got to say, even at age 36, Durant is still playing at such a high level. He's 5th in the league in scoring right now. Just I mentioned, just 26 points a game. But for some reason, the Suns aren't exactly lighting it up this year. They're tied for 8th place in the Western Conference, despite several stars on their team. They've got a very high salary. Meanwhile, Oklahoma City tops in the conference with a 39-9 record. They do it with defense, allowing the fewest points in the league, so he's got to work hard to get to that record tonight. That game, 9:30 Eastern Time, and it is in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
Well, Davis, always thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.